Hey there, my lovely dread drones. Welcome back to night 12 of the 13 days, edging on the brink of the big night itself. Feel like grabbing a slice of pizza before filling up on all of tomorrow's candy? Being forced into a costume that you don't feel like wearing? Well, sit back and enjoy the little time that you have left. It's time for a bonus event you may not have seen coming. For Friends at Freddy's Bonus Night.
The structure stood as resolute and ominous as it did charred and abandoned, broken and disjointed, not unlike the descriptions of those things, rumored to still roam its halls. Dimitri pondered how he had let Melvin, his friend of 10 years, talk him into this. The building resided at the end of a closed-down shopping plaza, most of its rental spaces having collapsed to the ground with neglect and waning structural integrity. The fire that originated in Fazbear's Pizzeria certainly contributed to the decrease in structural soundness, and even though it had originated from there, the remnants of Fazbear's Pizza stood true and dark. The space was nothing more than a hollow shell of its former self. Large windows had since been boarded up, doors chained and padlocked shut. No one had stepped foot inside in an age, but that was about to change. Dimitri and Melvin were joined by their two friends, Nathan and Kim, both of which bringing either beer or weed respectively, anticipating a night of fun. It was Halloween night, and the group of teens had decided they were too old for trick-or-treating, and with a little convincing, Melvin had gotten the group to agree to spend the night at this charred and abandoned location. None of the teens had a house to party at, and the town was too heavily monitored by police to party outside in the elements. So they had agreed on this place, a source of ominous local legends about ghosts and other paranormal happenings. Melvin was a good kid, shorter than his peers, but what he lacked in physical prowess, he made up for in enthusiasm, always delivering himself as the life of any party. Dimitri was Melvin's best friend, but had a contrasting personality. Dimitri was more introverted than his friend Melvin, keeping to himself and enjoying solitary activities, such as photography, something he was very passionate about. In fact, his expensive flash camera was one of the items he felt that he needed to have for the night. What was the point of spending an evening in a haunted location without the capability of photo documentation? Nathan was a bit on the quiet side too, taller than his friends, but when presented with a good time, he had no reservations regarding letting loose. He had a personality that seemed to complement both Melvin's outgoing and Dimitri's quiet natures. Lastly, there was Kim. Kim was beautiful and smart enough, and although she was not currently dating any of the boys that she was accompanying, she had dated all three of them at some point in time or another. Still, she had always been a friend first, and despite her dark hair, deep brown eyes, and good looks, she was simply one of the guys. Kim had ridden with Nathan in his car, but the two were no longer an item, while Dimitri and Melvin attended the padlock, chaining the only entry door shut. Nathan and Kim struggled with all of their provisions that they had brought with them, unloading them from the car parked around back, and brought them in through the front after Melvin had finally popped the lock. By the time Nathan had gotten back to the door, in fact, the aperture was wide open. Melvin and Dimitri were nowhere in sight. The darkness before him seemed to stretch onward for an eternity, and only for a moment did he hesitate before he heard his friends calling him from within. A moment later, Kim had begun to emerge from the black, headed back to the car for another round of supplies.
Just head straight back. You can't miss it. The place is great.
Kim exclaimed with enthusiasm. Nathan nodded in agreement, watching Kim walk past him to gather more things before turning to face the darkness ahead, assured of a good time. Within an hour, the four of them had set up in the main party area of the burned-out establishment. Sure, there were no more tables. The wallpaper and paint had long since burned away in the fire years ago, and the only illumination to be had was what they had brought with them. However, there were small snacks and pilfered alcohol aplenty, and because it was Halloween night, Kim insisted on bringing a few pumpkins along to be carved into jack-o'-lanterns. 2 had already been done. The flickering glow from their smiling and frowning faces, respectively, casted a show of dancing shadows across the wall, setting the ambient tone for the ghost story to follow.
You guys heard what happened here, right?
Melvin asked the rest of them out loud.
Yeah, the owner went nuts and tried to burn this place to the ground or something. My parents said it was for private insurance money.
Kim responded.
Yeah, I know that's not true.
Dimitri rebutted.
What do you mean? Why can't that be true?
Kim asked credulously.
Because he's dead. He died in the fire.
Dimitri added.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Kim said.
Well, just because he died in the fire doesn't mean he didn't actually start it. Maybe things went wrong.
Nathan spoke up.
I actually heard it was the mother of that missing kid, Scott whatever.
Melvin said.
Who?
Kim asked again, needing to be caught up.
Scott Irwin. His name was Scott Irwin.
Dimitri stated plainly, a confidence in his tone suggesting he knew what he was talking about.
Wait. That kid we went to school with a few years back? He was a grade older than us, right? And just kind of disappeared?
Melvin asked.
Yeah, and he didn't just disappear. He disappeared here.
Dimitri explained.
How the fuck do you know all this? Are you some kind of detective or something?
Nathan chuckled.
No.
Dimitri said flatly.
No, I was here. At his party, the night he disappeared.
I didn't know you were friends with him.
Melvin asked his friend.
Yeah, but I was here mostly because I knew Paul.
Dimitri revealed, referencing Scott's best friend.
That's right. Paul.
Melvin said to himself under his breath.
Wait, what happened?
Kim asked, now needing to hear the whole story.
It happened a few years ago.
Dimitri began.
Paul was a friend of mine in Melvin's. He was also Scott's best friend. They were both a grade older than me, and I knew Scott, but I knew Paul better. It was actually here, in this very room. That was the last place I saw either of them.
Did they die?
Kim asked, interested in what Dimitri was telling her.
Well, Paul did. No one knows what happened to Scott.
Melvin interjected.
Now it's what everyone says. See, the way I understand it, each of them asked the parents that night if they could spend the night in each other's house. That much I remember.
Dimitri explained.
Why did they do that?
Kim asked.
I didn't understand it back then either. I heard each of them ask the mothers that night, but never put it together until years later.
Dimitri elaborated.
Put what together?
Nathan asked.
Yet they made plans to stay overnight. Ever seen those I stayed at Walmart overnight videos on YouTube?
Dimitri asked the group, and they all nodded.
That was their plan. They schemed to stay the night here, after hours. Paul was found the next morning when the guy came in to open the place. Scott was nowhere to be found, but Paul's body was found in pieces, half stuffed into an animatronic suit.
Dimitri finished, hanging his head.
Wait, you think maybe Scott did it?
Kim inquired.
No way. From what I've heard, there is no way a kid could do what had been done to Paul. It was a real horror show. Besides, my cousin Chris had something very similar happen to him last year, across state. His friend Shane went missing, and now my cousin is in some insane asylum or something. Some kid he was babysitting too. From what his parents told me, he also went exploring some sister locations of this place and has never been the same since. I'm telling you guys, this place and all of its subsidiaries, something is definitely up.
Melvin insisted.
So how did this place burn down then?
Kim asked, reminding Dimitri of her original question.
Oh, well, technically no one knows, but it's a pretty wide-held belief that Mrs. Irwin, Scott's mom, was responsible. People say she felt the owners knew more than they let on, and that this place was a danger to anyone who happened inside. I mean, that's stuff she preaches outwardly. Shortly after, the place was set ablaze in the dead of night. Firefighters on the scene were able to save the majority of the structure, but the business itself was a total loss. But
Dimitri paused.
But what?
Kim prodded him.
But almost every firefighter on scene reported the same thing. It was even in the news as an unexplained phenomenon.
Dimitri said.
What was it?
Kim asked again, needing to know.
The screaming.
Dimitri said plainly and softly.
The place was supposed to be empty, and there wasn't supposed to be anyone on staff that night. And yet, almost everyone there that night attested to hearing a blood-curdling scream, multiple screams from multiple people, coming from within the building set ablaze. I mean, everyone heard it. Firefighters tried to go inside, trying to put out the fire as soon as possible, but no one was ever found. Hell, even after the fire had been put out, there was nothing but remnants of charred walls and incinerated insides down to piles of ash, but no bodies. Not one person was found inside, just the burned-out remains of 4 animatronics.
Dimitri finished, his face aglow from the now finished quartet of jack-o'-lanterns, unintentionally illuminating his countenance in a very atmospheric manner.
4?
Nathan asked.
Yeah, man. All 4 of those things. Chick, Bonnie, Foxy, and Freddy.
Melvin supported Dimitri's claim.
Well then, what the hell is that?
Nathan said again, pointing toward something behind Melvin and Dimitri. The pair turned to gander at an object, serving more as a construct that they had not noticed before. However, the increasing glow of the jack-o'-lanterns had revealed a charred and dirty fabric that hung from a portion of the ceiling like a shower curtain. The texture of it looked old and previously singed with flames. But this place had been an inferno the day it burned. No fabric should have remained at all. Dimitri and Melvin at first ignored Nathan's inquiry and instead sought the answer for themselves. The curtain had been pulled back a bit. They must not have seen it because the fabric appeared much like the black and dirty walls and floor, and the point of opening only lent itself to visual inspection due to the angle of where they had been sitting and the increase in lighting. But there was something inside that no one expected to see. Behind the curtain, about half of its form visible, stood something that shouldn't have been there. Its body was tall and lanky, its fur so charred and sooty it appeared black. It was the thing's eye that grabbed the attention of both Melvin and Dimitri so fervently, and as they slowly approached, fear hitched in their throats. It became more apparent what it was. In disbelief, Dimitri reached out a hand and drew back the curtain further, revealing now exactly who it was as well. The object pointed out by Nathan, and now fully realized and discovered by Melvin and Dimitri, was an animatronic. Instantly noted by the eye patch and the hook hand on its right arm as Foxy.
Wait, I thought you guys said this place was empty.
Kim asked with a tremor in her tone.
It was supposed to be. I guess maybe they missed some things.
Dimitri explained.
Well, if they missed this, what else did they miss? We need to explore this place.
Melvin insisted in exploration. Nathan supported their decision, opting to stay behind and keep Kim company. They weren't dating anymore, and he wasn't looking for an actual relationship. But Nathan was hoping to get laid anyway. Kim immediately spoke up and deliberated what a terrible idea she thought it was. Nathan reassured her that these were all just ghost stories, and there was no real danger to be had here, except for that of falling debris and other such environmental hazards. So when Melvin insisted that Dimitri accompany him, Kim hesitantly agreed to stay behind, having no interest in patrolling this creepy building in the dark, as she put it. With the logistics settled, Melvin and Dimitri grabbed one of the pumpkins for light and turned to wander the corridor that beckoned dark and long to their left. The two others stayed behind, sitting on the floor near to the glow of 3 jack-o'-lanterns. The throat of the corridor stretched long and dark, and if not for the flickering light guiding them, it would have been impossible to see one's hand in front of their face. Dimitri eyed the grimy and blackened walls as they passed, imagining all the light-hearted children's hand-drawn depictions that he knew once hung there, and how different everything seemed now. The cold and gritty atmosphere was such a contrast to the playful aura this place once had. The last time he had come here was for Scott's party all those years ago, but he remembered it like it was yesterday.
Do you really think she did it?
Dimitri asked Melvin.
Who? Scott's mom? I mean, I don't know, but it would certainly make sense.
Melvin responded back, eyeing what was once a room to their left, filled with blinking lights and a symphony of loud electronic beeps, whistles, and bells. Now, all that was left of the arcade were piles of charred wood, the remnants of broken sheetrock, and the collapsed ceiling that covered it all. As the hallway bent around to the left, Melvin and Dimitri turned their focus with it, and instantly, the two of them noticed the odd sight at the same time, not saying a word out loud, only looking at each other with acknowledgement. The pair both knew the layout of this place, having been here as children, and as such, each knew what lay ahead. It was the security office. What didn't make any sense, however, was for a building that shouldn't have any power, that a dim light was emanating from its western aperture. It wasn't a steady beam of light, or even a bright one at that, but the partially obstructed dim glow stood out amongst the black, like a neon light. Curious, the two of them approached slowly, and about 6 feet away from the door, they realized the entrance to the office to be mostly boarded up with 1x6s unevenly in a crisscrossing haphazard fashion, creating gaps in which one could slip their body through if they were so inclined. However, these gaps allowed for clear sight to what lay beyond those wooden boards, and what was the source of that glow. Upon peering inside, Melvin's face looked to the right next to Dimitri's, and the two saw something they did not expect, for it made no sense at all. There was a perfectly intact monitor screen on the charred remnants of a desk within the office. The desk looked as though it had been through the fire all those years ago, but the monitor looked brand new and displayed what looked like security footage.
Wait, what's that?
Melvin asked, pointing out the flickering glow of something off-screen, a screen that displayed the party room where Nathan and Kim sat waiting. But Dimitri said nothing. He didn't need Melvin to point anything out. He was watching the monitor with unwavering resolve, unblinking. His mind hung on every moment as what could only be described as a flaming figure that stepped into the frame, tall and menacing, behind Nathan and Kim, who turned to see that which stalked up behind them. And just to solidify that this was all happening in real time, Dimitri and Melvin heard Kim scream from down the hall just as her televised self spun to see that flaming animatronic with a hook for a hand standing right behind her, not looking all that dissimilar from one of those glowing jack-o'-lanterns. its insides aflame behind its one empty socket. Without saying a word to one another, both Dimitri and Melvin sprinted back towards the party room, both hoping to find anything other than what they expected. As they ran, Dimitri noticed small flecks of ember-like particles wisping through the darkness. The party area seemed to be emanating a warm light, as if the room was on fire. Kim's screams both continued and intensified, getting louder as the pair got closer. Once reaching the threshold, the two of them stopped cold in their tracks, causing Melvin to bump into Dimitri so hard it nearly knocked him to the floor. Nathan was clearly dead. It appeared as though his head had been nearly decapitated, attached, and left dangling off his shoulder on his right. The rest of his body simply slumped to the floor near to where they had been set up for the night, crumpled in such an unnatural way that it took the pair a moment of hesitation to realize exactly what it was. Thick crimson leaked from his wound, practically painting the floor all around him in more than a 5-foot radius. Despite all of this, it was what else was in that room that paralyzed them in horror. What could only be described as a flaming robot of sorts, over 6 feet tall, and a hook for one of its hands, stood, flames raging off of its monstrous form, holding a kicking and fighting Kim in its other. Dimitri immediately identified it for what it couldn't be, and therefore took the briefest of moments to turn and gaze back upon that black curtain. The stage beyond was now empty. He knew that no matter how crazy the idea was, that he was correct. That foxy animatronic had come to life and somehow been set ablaze and had killed Nathan. Dimitri took a step in the thing's direction in hopes of saving Kim from her fate, but in that same instant that Melvin grabbed his shoulder, halting his progress forward, did the robot animatronic thrust its raised hook towards Kim's face, burying the point of it into her eye. Kim squealed in a moment of agony, the eyeball having burst with a clear, gelatin-like substance. The monster twisted its hook while having it buried within Kim's skull, causing a loud cracking noise and halting Kim's shrieks instantly. As if the thing was simply dropping its luggage to the floor, the monster opened its robotic hand like a mechanical clamp releasing, causing Kim's lifeless body to drop to the floor. Melvin told Dimitri to run, but he didn't have to. In the same instant that the robot terror turned to face Dimitri, looking at him with its flaming countenance, one eye covered by the remnants of an eye patch, the other locked and focused right upon him, Dimitri turned and ran back down the hall behind him, hoping to find his escape deeper into the bowels of what remained of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Luckily, the exit that would ensure their safety was only down the hall, around the bend, right next to the office from where they had just been. Melvin turned the corner only an instant before Dimitri did the same, and before the two boys could reach the open aperture, the thick door slammed shut and was detectably secured from the outside.
No!
Melvin exclaimed as he reached the door, attempting to pry it open, beating his fists against it in rage and desperation.
What the fuck is going on?
Melvin exclaimed, more of a statement against the forces working against him rather than a question.
Is it locked? Are we trapped?
Dimitri asked, knowing the truth but hoping to deny it.
I don't know, man. I think...
Melvin halted his words, hitching his sentence in his throat. Dimitri looking past him over his shoulder into the black. Melvin turned to inspect the source of the noise that they had both heard close by, but only saw the blackness of the hallway as it continued on past the door, completely hidden in shadow.
Dude, what the fuck was...
Melvin was cut short by the long-eared, flaming apparition that leaped forward from the darkness, the flames having ignited as soon as it leaped forward, concealing it in shadow until it had lunged and grabbed a hold of Melvin.
Run!
Melvin screamed as the flaming paws of the robotic bunny wrapped Melvin's face in all-consuming flames, gripping him by his mouth and upper jaw, and pulled his skull apart, as the mechanical arms were wrenched in opposition to each other. Dimitri was instantly sprayed with a coating of warm crimson, bathing him in blood from his hair to his shoes. He had nearly slipped and fallen when he had turned to run as Melvin instructed, which would have been a death sentence right then and there, for the tattered and blackened body of Bonnie, engulfed in a roaring fire, was right behind him and getting ever closer. Dimitri turned to the corner of the hall, knowing the monster was right behind him. Just before he could be snatched up, Dimitri ducked down and slid under the 1x6s that were restricting access to the office room. Dimitri backed against the back wall, opposite the cameras, and after a few seconds, realized he was not being pursued. Dimitri's eyes wandered to the totally out-of-place security monitor. For a moment, he saw nothing. He heard nothing, and breathed a momentary exhale in relief. He didn't have a chance to begin grieving over his friends. In the next instant, a tall and ghastly figure, aglow with the flames of a fire that engulfed it, seemingly coming from inside of it, stepped into view of what looked like the hallway, ever approaching the security office. Dimitri knew that if he were somehow able to get out of this alive, no one would ever believe him, that he would be held responsible for the gruesome deaths of his friends. The monstrous animatronic stepped out of frame of the security screen, only for it to switch to another fixed location, reinforcing two constructs now solidified into truth. The monster appeared like a tall, flaming bird, its slack and monstrous jaw lined with what appeared to be a beak, and in one of its hands it held one of the jack-o'-lanterns from the party area, the gourd's sinister grin easily viewed even through the low-resolution camera feed. It also confirmed that the beast was walking, plodding ever onward towards his location. Dimitri pulled his camera up to his face just as the thing stepped into the mouth of the partially boarded-up aperture on the right-hand side of the room. Dimitri snapped a picture, and to his astonishment, it had vanished. The terrifying Chica animatronic had disappeared. A moment later, something not caught by the security cameras and catching him a bit off guard was seen heading in his direction. It was another sauntering, fire-engulfed horror, this one too holding a jack-o'-lantern. The beast's head was topped with a small hat and faced the door. One of its bear-like ears were missing, and its shoulders turned to follow suit, its burning eyes staring lifelessly at Dimitri. The thing raised its free paw, ready to smash through the boards, just as the camera flash had recharged. Dimitri pushed the button on top once more, lighting his surroundings in an instantly brilliant bright white light, before fading, taking that monster with it. Dimitri looked down at his watch, hoping it would soon be morning and that maybe these things would go away. It was 4:13 a.m., not much longer till sunrise. Dimitri also pondered his friends, Paul and Scott, wondering if this was the kind of terror that they had experienced all those years ago. But as he did, Dimitri caught sight of something on the security monitor that had been flipping randomly at timed intervals. The current screen displayed what was outside, specifically just beyond the front door, the one that had shut and locked it, trapping him and Melvin inside. Dimitri's breath hitched. There was someone there, a boy or a man, standing outside, staring up at the camera, and Dimitri felt that somehow he recognized him. He couldn't be sure, but he had seen some of the pictures that Melvin's parents collected during frequent visits to his house, and this guy looked a lot like Melvin's cousin, Chris. And even though the footage was black and white, his eyes somehow glowed a brilliant green. In his curiosity, Dimitri failed to focus on the dark beyond the boarded-up doorways. He turned as soon as he heard the running. It was already too late. Outside, the man with the green eyes looked on at the building, expressionless. and motionless. He was no longer the same person. He had changed. They had seen to that. He turned and headed off aimlessly into the dwindling night of a silent and sleeping town, knowing that he had done what he had set out to do, and soon, like him, they would all be free.
Well, that concludes the countdown. I'm sure hope you survived this long, for if so, you're not going to want to miss out on tomorrow's epic Halloween special blowout event. So, celebrate wisely, and remember, if it says keep out, there may be a reason, and you should listen. So remember, until tomorrow, keep an eye on that plushie.